Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered. I'm your host, Paige Fullman. So, the midterms are starting to heat up a whole, year and 3 months in advance of when the actual election is. But, the primaries will be in early of 2026. So I've been toying with the idea of having people that are running for office on. What I'm thinking is people from all levels of office. And this is where this week's guest comes into play. This week, we have Matthew Adams on, who is running for California Assembly in the 9th District. Hopefully, as time goes on, I'm going to start to have more people that are running for office come on, and I've been talking to a few people that are running, and it's given me a lot of hope about where these midterms are headed. Of course, I'm mostly talking to Democrats. I'm not really talking to Republicans because they've lost their marbles, but the Democrats that I've spoken to are really just pushing. Actually, that's a lie. I don't think they're pushing a message of hope. I think I'm feeling a lot of hope from the message that they're pushing. It's incredible to see what people are standing for and what they're fighting for, and, just leaves me feeling a smidge hopeful. But back to Matthew. Matthew Adams is an educator and political organizer from Woodbridge, California, who is a Democratic candidate for State Assembly in District 9. In his career, he has worked for groups including Habitat for Humanity and Equality California, as well as various political campaigns across California's Central Valley and Bay Area. I am so excited to give you all this conversation with Matthew Adams. And without further ado, here it is. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on. It is great to have you.
Yeah, honored to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
I'm hoping we can start and give us a little background. Tell me a little bit about yourself and what led you to run for California Assembly.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been involved in politics basically since college. I graduated in 2017 from Sacramento State with a degree in political science. And I was an intern for my local assembly member at the time, did that for about a year. I've kind of bounced around between various politically adjacent nonprofits like Habitat for Humanity and Equality California, which is an LGBTQ plus civil rights group, and just a bunch of political campaigns in my area in the Central Valley, as well as the Bay Area, working my way up the ranks, kind of being an organizer, field director, campaign manager. So politics has always been my professional life, something I've cared a lot about. And the opportunity arose in this last race that nobody was challenging our current assembly member. It's kind of been a race that I've been looking at for a while. Seemed like it was a good opportunity to hop in. That's where I'm at right now.
Was there a specific moment where you were like, oh my goodness, I have to throw my hat in the ring?
Yeah, funnily enough, didn't have to dig too deep to find any real excitement about this race. I was kind of looking around at my local elected officials, as one does, on a deep Wikipedia dive one night, and came across my assembly member, Heath Flores' Wikipedia page. Scroll to the bottom, get to the fun facts section, or not so fun facts, and found out that there was this huge scandal that he was involved in 2020, where he had been involved in an extramarital affair. So he had cheated on his wife with a lobbyist for the healthcare industry. That could have been a huge scandal, but nobody's really run against the guy, so it never became anything. And it was as bad as that is just by itself in a vacuum. He's also been representing us on the Health Oversight Committee in the Assembly. So it's a huge conflict of interest that has never just been called out. The guy doesn't do a lot anyway. Of course, we're also from political parties, different political parties. He's a Republican. I'm a Democrat. It seemed like, look, if nobody else is going to do something about this, I think I have a duty to do something. So let's stand up against this and make sure we can get somebody a little better in there.
Do you have a theory as to why it wasn't really covered?
Well, it's tough to cover something that doesn't have a lot of interest, unfortunately. I mean, the death of local media, I think, is really evident in cases like this, right? Where I'm from the town of Lodi, and Lodi has its own local paper. It's been cutting back for years. It used to be a daily paper every 7 days. Then they just released no weekend issues. Then they released no Monday issues. They've been cutting staff. And a lot of their news articles now are kind of just taken from the Sacramento paper, which is a bigger paper nearby, or the national interest stuff. There's some local stories, but they're pretty sparse. This is a story that I just think slipped by them because it wasn't really covered by a lot of the local papers or the semi-local papers. Nobody's running against this guy, so what's even the point? I could easily see that being the justification in the newsroom, so it didn't really break through. And then, again, years have gone by and nobody's done anything related to this. The assembly by itself is not a particularly interesting race, or not even just the races. Once you're in office, nobody really talks about assembly. They hardly ever talk about Congress. So, I mean, forget about anything on the state level. I think those kind of combined to be a perfect storm that he was able to just kind of skate by.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's the same, like, just anywhere in the country. Like, I didn't know who my state representative was until I worked for a statewide organization. And I was like, oh, now I know this woman and I actually kind of like her.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, most people don't know really any elected official other than maybe the president. And even that's maybe hit or miss. Less so these days. Trump is such a figure out there, but you know.
And there is, at least Illinois has a website where like you can put in your address and it gives you like every single representative or senator that you have. And like I found that to be like pretty awesome, where like when I meet people, especially in Illinois, that are like, I don't know who my person is, I'm like, well, here you go. Here's this website. Type it in. Let's go. Like, let's find out together.
The number of times I've been at somebody's door and they tell me the same thing. Like, I don't know who any of my representatives are. I've never really cared. And it's like, well, do you want to know? There's a website right here that does the same thing. So it's a great tool, underutilized by a lot of people. And I get it. I understand why. It's not super flashy, not super exciting, but people should know who their local, and not just local, people should know who represents them on all levels, because it all will affect you at some point.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But back to your race, for people who have never run for office, which I think would be the majority of people, what does it actually take to get started on a campaign?
Yeah, it is an interesting situation to run for office. I think even if most people haven't, which most people haven't, I think a lot of people have kind of considered briefly, like, what would it take? And I think a lot of people are kind of scared because of what you think it would take to get involved and what it would take to run. It's a little bit like a Ratatouille situation. Anybody can cook, anybody can run. You know, I think that running just by itself, just getting started, is something that basically anybody can do. Getting involved at the county registrar's office, just go and talk to them. They will help you through the process. They'll help you file all the paperwork you need. If you need to pay any fees right there, you need to sort out any legal paperwork, they got you. So then you can officially be on the ballot. And that's all you need to do to run, technically, right? That's super easy. Running to win is a lot harder, obviously, because a lot of people, and I do make that differentiation, because there are a lot of people who do just want to run, like for whatever reason or the other. They know that it's going to be a non-competitive race. They kind of just want to get like a little local fame. They want to get their name on the ballot. They want to be a party nominee and have that on their resume. And a lot of people can just do that, be like a sacrificial lamb, and that's it, right? And that's fine. There's merit in that, I suppose. But if you're running to win, which I am, beyond that, you have to have a lot of, unfortunately, money. I think that is kind of the thing that, like, if you're going to run, if you're even thinking about running, you better have a good amount in your savings, and you better have a good amount of time as well. So being able to take time off work or have a job that's very flexible is unfortunately a must. And that's what scares a lot of the average working people off, because who can take the time off of their job? Who has a bunch of savings? And to be clear, I don't have a bunch of savings, and I don't have a lot of time to take off from my job. Currently, I'm a substitute teacher. I was teaching full time last year in kind of preparation for what this race was going to be. I've been looking at this for the last couple of years. I've been putting some money away, making the proper planning for flexibility as much as I could for the next year. It's not a long-term plan, but it's something you have to plan for, right? And then I've been lucky that my job has been in the political sphere, that I've been able to make a good amount of connections in my area. If you haven't been in that space, which most people haven't, you're going to have to go to every single event that you can find that is political or political adjacent. So not just your local Democratic or Republican clubs, not just your town halls or your city council meetings, but is there anything that is going on that is like at the local college that has a bunch, like there's a protest going on? Go and talk to all the people that you can there. Is there, somebody coming in who is going to be recording a podcast or something that has like a live audience? Maybe, you go and talk to those people, right? Like anything you can think of, or like any news reporter that you may know, like getting all those connections. That's the most time consuming and I think frustrating part of somebody just getting started, because you're starting from behind the eight ball, especially if you're running against an incumbent, which I am in this race. You're just going to be behind on everything. And you have to be okay with a lot of that pressure and a lot of that stress for, I think, probably most of the campaign, if not the entire campaign. You have to be able to think, if I want to win, I'm never going to win on those things. I'm never going to have more money. I'm never going to have more connections, but I can get close enough. And then everything else in my resume or my policies can put me over the hump. And you have to be confident enough in yourself and your plans and your team to be able to do that.
Right. For you, what has been the most surprisingly difficult or tedious part of everything? You outlined kind of the difficulties, but for you personally, what was the thing that made you go, what am I doing?
Yeah, I think the thing that's probably the most confusing and frustrating is there's a disconnect, I think, between a lot of people wanting to be politically active and wanting to say, I support the Democratic Party or I support the Republican Party. For me, as the only Democrat running in this race against a Republican in an area that I've mostly been talking to Democratic people, right? Because I'm starting out to try and build my base of connection on that front. The amount of time I've just been completely ghosted from people who align with me on values and goals and even same level of notoriety. Like, I'm not contacting the governor. I'm not contacting my congressperson. I'm reaching out to local clubs and local people or local business owners and saying, here's what I am. Here's what I want to do. Could we take some time to talk? And just no interest. And that's super frustrating because, again, it's early in the race. We have a year and a half or so until the general. And I get that. People aren't thinking about politics at all right now. And even if they are thinking about politics, they're definitely not thinking about a state level assembly race. So they may not even understand what this message means or take the time to care because they have their own life going on. So the amount of work you have to do to get people interested before you can even get into the room with them is something that, even being involved in as many campaigns as I have, I think I undervalued or underappreciated how tough that was going to be. Once you get in the room with somebody, you can have a conversation, then things can really get going, but it's hard to get those initial meetings.
Well, and I understand why businesses or notable people in the community might not want to get involved because, it's politics.
Yeah.
Historically, those are not supposed to be spoken about at the kitchen table, although that's a little out the window these days. But, local elections are the bedrock of our entire community. So it's, and more relatively, I think, low stakes. You don't typically get, in my opinion, at least in the Illinois Assembly, more of our state assembly people are not as extremist on either end, which is why it should be theoretically more low stakes for local businesses to host something like that or, do something with you.
That was my line of thinking as well. It's it's probably not going to generate a lot of headlines one way or the other. It's kind of just coming down to what you personally want to do and your political involvement. And I guess the fact of the matter is again, it's like dichotomy. And I don't want to blame anybody for not wanting to get involved at every local politic level. It can be really exhausting and it can be really frustrating, even if you think nothing is really going to come of it. You may just not want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. But it's frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. On the candidate end, it's even, I'm not running for office, but even on the podcast, when I reach out to people and I'm please just get on the phone with me. Please. I promise once we speak on the phone, you'll see that everything's normal, everything's fine, especially again, because I reach out to people that sometimes aren't inherently political in nature and aren't involved in politics. It's so hard to be I have this political podcast, but we don't have to touch the political if you don't want to.
Yeah, right.
It's so hard to build that trust.
It is. It really is. Unfortunately, the podcasting business and politics business and most businesses, I would say, trust is everything, right? If you don't have that trust already established through some other means, it's hard to do a cold call and just strike up something. Not impossible.
The amount of emails I have that have gone unanswered I haven't counted, but I'm sure it's up to 50 or 100 over the last 6 months.
Yeah. It's like applying for a job. You put a lot out there, you put yourself out there, you put all the work in your resumes and your applications, and you're going to get maybe 1% of them back and another percent that is just a form letter rejecting you because they didn't even read anything.
Yeah. Well, that's what I always say. I'm if for every 10 emails I send out, I probably get one that works out and gets back to me. And I probably get one that gets back to me and then never answers ever again. It really is the job application process.
Yeah.
So I know you said you have a background in, campaigns and political work. Is that kind of how you went about building a team and support network throughout this race?
Yeah. I officially launched my campaign last month. I've been in the works of my campaign since about April. So in the last 5-ish months or so, the way I've been building my network for this campaign is doubling back with anybody who I've worked with before, letting them know that I'm going to be running and seeing if they'd be interested in connecting me with people or pointing me in the right direction and seeing where that goes. That's not the bulk of my quote unquote team. Full disclosure, not a huge team. It's the people that are working daily on my campaign is me. It's just me. The people that I get to assist on advice or running stuff by is my brother and my best friend and my parents. Right. So at
it's a
this
one-man
stage,
show. That's okay. I'm a one-woman show over here too.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny when like I ever do get a reply from somebody and they're like, "Hello, Adam's team." And it's like, it is just me, but thank you. Thank you for the generosity to assuming I have a team. But the informal team, right? The larger tent of people that I can count on for general support or connecting me with people is that. And then also, like I said, like getting the local community people that I do get in contact with and tapping them for that. More recently, as I've gone to more of these meetings, I've gotten a lot of younger people that have been interested in my campaign, which is great. I'm obviously a bit of a younger guy. I'm 29, and that's in politics extremely young. So many
That's a
people,
baby.
yeah, yeah. People are excited that there's a younger person running for something and they want to get involved. And students have a lot of time to get involved and a desire to have something on their resume. So I'm getting a little bit of traction there, which all campaigns have a backbone of underpaid or completely unpaid students doing a lot of the stuff for them that people just aren't aware of. And my campaign, I'm hoping, will be no different.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody who's running for office in Illinois, and they were saying much of the same. It's so funny to me how these campaigns rely on like all this unpaid labor, and really like younger people are the backbone of so much of it. Like any political kind of consultant or whatever, that's spent 30 years doing whatever they're doing. If you ask them about how they started out, it's, oh, I was, door knocking for free 30 years ago for like X campaign. Like that's how everybody starts it.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, just another example of how inaccessible politics is to the average person. There's a few people that have asked, like, how do I get involved in politics? I want to be a campaign manager, or I want to run for office myself, and I want to like make the connections. What do I have to do? And then you have to tell them, it's like, you have to be able to work really long hours for a really long time. When I was a campaign organizer, I would work often 7-day weeks or maybe 6-day weeks if I was lucky, in like 10, 12-hour days for campaigns that most of the time didn't win. I didn't have a chance of winning, but you take the jobs, you travel, you go to these places, and you build your connections, you get stuff on your resume, and then you hope that you eventually get attached to like a winning campaign, and then something happens down the line, and it's not a reassuring answer for a lot of people.
Right. Well, so much of like building a career in the political space is getting lucky and somehow picking the winning candidate by chance.
Mm-hmm. I think I worked on 4 campaigns before I got on one that was winning, and I was still at a pretty low level. Like I worked for the Tom Steyer campaign in 2020, which was one of the 2 billionaires who was running in like a 20-person field. And that was the first campaign I had worked on where, one, it was pretty clear that nobody really believed in it. And also that this was just an experience building thing for everybody involved. So you work in a lot of those campaigns. And then I think I was I was just working the phones for the Gavin Newsom recall, opposed to the new call, keeping him in the Gavin Newsom recall, tongue twister, keeping him in office, opposing the recall. And we won that. But it's like, there's nothing really that could happen there. It's not like he would be hiring people after that. And if he would, he definitely wouldn't be hiring somebody on the lowest level. But I got a win under my belt eventually, but it took a long time.
Right. So we talked about a little bit of the negatives. So what for you has been the most rewarding part so far?
Yeah, I think it is when you break through and you get a chance to connect with people. That's always been the most rewarding part of anything that I've been involved in politics, is when you talk to somebody who has been wanting to get involved or wanting to help, and you can actually give them opportunity to do that. It's very fulfilling. More recently, as I have been running specifically, as opposed to just organizing for somebody else's behalf, the feeling that somebody has seen what I've put out there, like looked at my policy platform, looked at my experience and said, like, I'm actually going to vote for you, is incredibly kind and generous, because, every campaign is not just based on the candidate, of course, not me, us, that usual stuff, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, I am putting a lot of myself out there. I am putting a lot of my ideas and my reputation and my ego out there on the line. Anybody that's willing to take a chance on any of that it's worth more than I even thought it was going to be before I started this thing. It's really kept me going, that there's people that are willing to invest in these values, in this race, and make sure that we can have some better representation. That's been really great.
Well, it's hard to put yourself out there. It's vulnerable. Like you, I'm sure, and like me myself, like I stand so wholeheartedly behind my ideas and like what I believe in, but there is still a sort of vulnerability to get in front of a camera, a microphone, and like say it with your chest and
Yeah.
open it up to feedback from the pulpit.
Yeah. I mean, it's a truism, not just in politics, but in anywhere of like when you're talking to somebody or going against somebody who has been in the business for a lot longer, they have a record that they are attached to, right? Because they have put themselves out there and there's things that they can be held accountable for. And that cuts both ways, both in the sense of you can use it against them, but also like having a record and being able to have something that you can stand on that you have been able to point to and say, I did all of that over the course of these years. Having the value of that starting to build it's really cool. It's really cool to see it happen in real time.
Right. So let's move on and talk about your great state of California.
That's
it is
right.
a
That's right.
obviously massive state, very diverse state
Mhm.
with a lot of, more localized concerns. For you and where you're at, what are the biggest issues that you're hearing of from voters in your district?
Yeah. So let me tell people who may not be from California or aware of the area what my district is first off. So like I mentioned, was in Lodi, California, which is a very rural agricultural area right in the central part of California. It's about an hour to 30 minutes, depending on traffic, south of Sacramento, our capital. My district involves that, a town above it called Galt. It skips the larger town of Stockton and then goes to the slightly smaller but still larger town of Manteca. And those are the main population areas of what district I'm running to represent, which is District 9 in the Assembly. Pretty conservative area, pretty rural agricultural area. That's the main takeaway here. We are one of the biggest producers of wine in the state outside of Napa Valley. We have a lot of farmers, a lot of water concerns. So that leads to the main localized concern that we have is water and our agriculture, making sure that that is protected, making sure that we have those issues spoken for. It's kind of a hot button issue for the state at large because we're not the only ones that care about water. Obviously, California has been in the drought a lot over the past decade or so, and going back even further, obviously even worse. There's been plenty of proposals over the years that would take the water that is mostly resigned for our area and shipping it down south. There's like a big twin tunnels, Delta tunnel pipelines, what they call it, from our Delta water system, and taking it from the Central Valley and shipping it down to Southern California, where they have their own water needs, less agricultural and more just, a residential, domestic, which is valid. Everyone needs water, obviously. But it's tough to make the case, especially because we're not a power player in California politics, because it is mostly conservative and there's a huge Democratic supermajority in the state legislature, and there's just not a lot of people of note from our area. So we have no one really representing us on any sort of large stage. It's very easy for our concerns to be pushed to the side. We've been lucky that so far this water issue has been relatively unpopular for economic reasons. If they find a way to do it that is less costly, I think they would also ignore the large environmental concerns, because unfortunately that just doesn't move people as much as it should. But we've been lucky that it is so expensive that it just hasn't been popular anywhere. I know that as soon as they can find a way, it probably is going to really threaten our way of life here in our district. And that's a hyper-localized issue that doesn't really get talked about in a lot of other places. Of course, and as I'm sure we'll get into, there's a lot more familiar issues that we are also talking about as well. But that's the one where it's like, what's unique about the area that you're in? That's probably the main one.
So my next question is a little bit of a story behind it. So as you know, there's lots of national issues, lots of statewide issues and whatever.
Yeah.
A lot of times locally, people will conflate what is going on nationally with what you should be doing as a state elected representatives. How do you balance those national concerns, because typically they're not stuff that you personally would be dealing with as an assemblyman, with the very local needs of your community?
Yeah, it's tough. If anybody has ever gone to a town hall or question and answer session with any politician, the questions that they will get almost never relate to what they are actually in charge of. Even if they are a very important person and they have like a lot of range of what they can do, usually for whatever reason, their questions will be hyper local and stuff that they actually can't really affect, like how loud cars are going on your street or when trash pickup is. And if you are somebody that deals with that stuff, like at the county level or the city level, you'll get a bunch of questions about stuff that is going on in Washington, D.C. that has nothing to do with you. So it's all too common to be prepared as a politician. That's like, you should have answers on everything and always find a way to pivot back to what you can do. A great example of that I have incorporated myself. So there's one that is more easily to dovetail into mine, which is the big, beautiful bill stuff, the big Medicaid cuts. Technically, there's not really anything I can do with that at the state level, right? Because that's a federal program. Federal money is coming in. There's a lot of concerns about rising healthcare costs in our country at large. It's been really bad for the last who knows how long, how expensive things have been, especially compared to other countries, how people get treated, how people don't get treated, all that stuff. There's not a whole lot that can be done if all that federal money goes away. It's a concern that changes a lot of things on the local level. I mean, more recently, as a result of these cuts, the local hospital in Lodi Memorial Hospital, has already done a hiring freeze where they are saying, we're not going to hire any more nurses for the rest of the year and maybe going forward. That's indefinite. And we're also going to have to cut some services for our emergency room because people are just coming in more and more there, and we just don't have enough to redirect all the people that we need to. So there's ripple effects to a lot of this stuff that affects our local things, even if there's not a lot we can do about it. What the pivot there is what we can do to secure our own healthcare in California is we can beef up our own protections for Medi-Cal. We can make sure that that remains funded. We can make sure that funding does get redirected to our hospitals like Lodi Memorial to make sure that they have the money in place to hire the people that they need to get treatment. We have a large Veterans Affair building in a nearby town of French Camp that was recently opened and remains mostly empty because there's just not enough people to staff it. And our veterans continue to get shafted when it comes to getting proper care after they return home from their tours of duty. So no surprise there. But there are things we can do to redirect some of the national issues and make them more local. It's harder on some other issues. Like immigration is a big hot button issue right now. And people are very concerned about, they're concerned about two different things depending on what political lean they are in. Either they're concerned about immigrants coming in and they want to put a stop to that, which is not really a whole lot you can do on the state level because that's really just a federal thing. Or they're concerned about the ICE raids that are coming and taking people from different communities and rounding them up, whether they are immigrants or not. And there's a little more we can do there in terms of protection for our local communities, but we can't tell ICE what to do as much as we try to. But those concerns are harder because immigration completely is just really out of our wheelhouse. That's a complete federal issue. Again, the dovetail there, the pivot is that we can, if you're concerned about the ICE raids, what we can do is there's a bill in the legislature right now that would make it so if law enforcement officials come into California, we can make it so if they wear masks, then they are in violation of our law and we can make sure that they aren't able to do their job by restricting them, cutting off their access. We don't share any data from our immigration law enforcement stuff that we have locally. You can do that. You can ensure that we will not cooperate on a bunch of different levels. If people are concerned about immigrants coming in and from wanting to stop that flow, one, that's not really something that I particularly agree with, so I wouldn't necessarily be sympathetic to those concerns anyway. But people have those concerns, especially in the area that I'm in. But also, you can kind of hit them with that's kind of up to the federal government. What we can do is make sure that people are properly processed, try and be compassionate to the immigrants, and you try and hope that the compassion that you have gets through to the voter, not just on this issue, but on homelessness and just all sorts of issues, right? And you say, we want to treat these people as people. And I think you would agree that that's a thing that we can do that would be beneficial to everybody. On the state level, we can make sure these people are not held in horrible conditions. We can make sure that these people are connected with their families. And then we can do the best that we can to hand them off in a position that they are able to succeed once they are with the federal government. And then you kind of just hope the conversation goes well from there. So that's the conversations that I've had more recently where it's there's nothing I can do on that, but how about this? It's close.
So what do you think it really takes to cut through that national level noise of what we're being inundated with on cable news? It's the same 6 issues every day and they're just being drilled into us. So, I understand why people might not be able to differentiate between what's a local concern and what can be handled locally and what's a national concern that needs to be handled nationally. So what does it really take to cut through that and get through to voters in your district?
Yeah, I think the thing that cuts through is the personal touch. There's a reason that most campaigns, most outreach efforts are direct voter contact at your door, making calls, making sure that they have a real person that is able to talk to you. Because what you see on TV and what you hear on the radio or on YouTube or your podcasts is only going to tell you part of the story. The people that are in your community that you can talk to about the issues that are affecting them and affecting you is going to open your eyes a lot more to stuff that is maybe you've never said out loud that you believe. Maybe you have like believed this thing for a long time, then you start talking about it and it's like, actually, I don't know really a whole lot about this, or I don't really know what this is leading to. I'm glad I kind of voiced my opinion on this to somebody to kind of hash it out. And even if you end up in the same place that you were in before, or you still don't really understand the issue, what you can get away from that and what can cut through the noise is, again, the compassion of like the positive response that you can have with politics that continues to get you engaged in the system. That is something that can last. And the more that people talk with other people, even if they have the same beliefs, but the more diverse and other opinions that you can introduce into your own life, not just from politics, but really across your whole life, I think the better a lot of people will be and have been from the people that I've been in touch with in my line of work. It really does make a difference to kind of cut through and say like, I should be thinking about this, or I should be thinking about this way. And I wouldn't have if I hadn't talked to a real person about it, because the TV is going to say what they're always going to say. And if I never question that, I'm going to be in the same place as I was. And I'm usually going to be very angry about it. And I'm going to be very despondent and think the system can't do anything. Meeting one person who has a little bit of hope can change that for people. And that cuts through the noise. So that's what I've got to focus on. And what I think a lot of smaller campaign teams have to focus on is, again, just being present in your community and letting people know that like people are still working and want to hear from you. And that will solve some things.
Right. Well, it's the same from the voter side. Like the bulk of my listeners on this podcast are California, Texas, and Illinois. So I've been reaching out to people that are running in Illinois. So Dick Durbin's Senate seat is open. And so is my representative, Jan Schakowsky. She stepped down. So there's a bunch of people running for that primary. So I've been reaching out to their teams, and I haven't particularly picked a person that I would like to vote for. But every time I like reach out to the campaign and I speak to the candidate, like I'm always just so, at least the ones I've reached out to, I'm sure there's some bad candidates out there.
I'm sure.
But they're so eloquently spoken, like so willing to get to know me. And I'm like, guys, like you're gonna make me not know who to vote for. Like you guys have to stop being so nice. Like it's that personal touch of like being spoken to as an equal in some ways. Like I understand that like that's their job as they're running for the primary, but I always leave and I'm like, you know what, they'd be great in office. Like really having that one-to-one conversation and speaking about the things that are like where you guys can overlap, it goes such a distance with the voter.
It does. And you say that, it's hard to read too much into that because it is their job. But really, I mean, one, it's telling that you have to reach out to them. I know it's early, but like really people should be reaching out to the voters as much. And they don't do that as much. And the ones that do, I mean, how often is it actually them too, right? I mean, a lot of these people are, not to paint with a broad brush, but I think people forgive me, out of touch millionaires or other wealthy people that don't really have a lot in common with the average voter. So if they do go out and talk to people, which is actually rare, I think, well, actually, I take that back. I think people know exactly how little they hear from their politicians. But if you do ever see one of those people out there talking to the community, it usually goes pretty poorly. I was at a town hall not too long ago for my local congressperson who is another millionaire. He's a Democrat. And, on the issues, he agreed with a lot of people in the audience. But by the end of the thing, he had the audience almost completely turned against him because he just wasn't good at reading the room. And like we were asking, like, what are you doing to oppose Trump? Like, are you thinking about impeachment? And he just was unable to commit to something that he had gone on record on in the past because like he didn't want to be like too one way or the other. He wanted to like ride the middle that night, and the voters in that room just weren't feeling it. He needed some passion right now, and he just was unable to provide it completely. So people who walked in the room on his side left the room pissed. And it's just like, what are we doing?
Right. To be unable to like read the room like that as a politician is insane. And it's so obvious, like so many people are angry or upset at the nationally elected Democrats, especially, to then be able to like not deliver at your own town hall is crazy. Although, to be fair, anyone that has like had a town hall since Trump started his second term, if they say something air quotes wrong, the clip immediately goes viral, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. At this point, because these town halls are so closely watched by people waiting for those clickbaity things, I see the political thinking behind it to be like, well, I'm just gonna be even keeled.
I'm sympathetic to the fact that it's like, you want to be careful on what you say, but also like, how did you not know this was going to come up? Did you not test this message at all? You didn't think people would talk about the president? Like, I don't know.
Right. Right. Like, those are questions that at this point you should expect. Like, you need to have some sort of something that you maybe can still ride the middle on, but like, you gotta give people some, like, something to punch back at or something.
Yeah. And not to completely derail this with my own campaign, but that is what I'm here to talk about. It's better to do a bad town hall than to do no town halls or any voter outreach, like the guy that I'm running against, Heath Flora, who hasn't held a town hall since 2017. So at least people are out there, you know?
Yeah. Well, I do think town halls are, so necessary. And they've been, in the last 6 months, 7 months, like, so in the spotlight as something that is necessary, especially the politicians that are refusing to have town halls or ignoring requests to have town halls. Like, that's a bad thing. You are representing your district. You need to talk to your district to understand what you should be representing.
That should be how it works, shouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move a little bit more statewide to California as a whole. You have a governor who is a little bit off the rails, maybe in a good way, maybe not. But the governor's race is starting to heat up. Gavin Newsom will be out in the next election. What do you think the race is starting to signal about where California is headed politically? And is there anyone in particular that you are watching?
Yeah, the governor's race is going to be the race to watch next year, other than, of course, the District 9 Assembly race, which I am in. Close second is the governor's race, because what kind of candidates that we are going to support there is going to determine, I think, a lot, not just about California, but as we've seen, a lot of the national coverage, because as we say in California, so goes the nation, right? Whether that's true or not, it's what we believe. And I think that's bared out mostly true for the last couple of years. Gavin Newsom is, of course, turned out, so he will not be able to be governor again. The current frontrunner on the Democratic side, and every side, is the Congresswoman Katie Porter, who is self-described Elizabeth Warren acolyte. She is at about 20% support in the last poll, which is a couple of weeks ago. Behind her, it's two Republicans who each have about 10% of the vote. And then beneath them, it's a bunch of other Democrats of, very high pedigree, a lot of great positions and titles, but they're all kind of fighting for second.
Back of the pack.
Yeah, because for people that are unfamiliar with California politics, we have a top two primary system. So the top two vote getters who move on to the general election, which is not necessarily one Democrat and one Republican. It can be, and often has been, but it could be two Democrats or two Republicans, although probably not in this case, are going against each other for the general election. So really, those Democrats underneath those two Republicans are really hoping that they can break through and become second place, because they will still get to move on, which is an important qualifier that people may not know. The fact that it is Katie Porter in the lead, I think, is telling us what we kind of already know about our politics, is that everything is nationalized. She has the most name recognition as a former congressperson. The people that are running against her have mostly state-level positions. There's like the education secretary for California that's running, a former assembly speaker that's running. The lieutenant governor was running, but she dropped out because of low support. So a lot of state-level politicians, and then Katie Porter's like the federal. It's telling that she's so far ahead of the pack and is most likely going to make it to the top two, if not win the race. That being said, the other person that people are looking at as like, this could disrupt the race, now that Kamala's not running, who is the only other real contender that could be like, obviously fame, recognition, all that stuff, but she's not running for governor. Now we're looking at one of our two senators, Padilla, who has recently gotten news from being arrested or quote unquote arrested. I think he was just like detained or whatever from a press conference at an ICE related event. So he's been on the national radar lately. He's in a couple years into his senatorial career. He rose through the ranks as a state secretary of state, I believe, for California. If he comes in, experts are predicting that he's probably going to be the new frontrunner instead, because he has an even larger profile and he's currently in the Senate right now, so he can capture a lot more. Either way, what both of these candidates being so high in the polls tell us is that our focus is on what can California do nationwide? How can we capture the nation's attention? How can we oppose Trump? Because that's been successful for Governor Newsom. And it's just what we're looking to play as our role in the country, is California leading the conversation, leading the nation's decisions and all of that stuff. That's what we're looking to do.
Do you think if Trump wasn't president, if he was never president in 2016 and not now, do you think that these, people that are known for being at the federal level, do you think they'd still be the front runners, or do you think that's because that's where most of the action is right now?
I mean, just because a lot of these races are popularity contests and name recognition things, probably they'd still be front runners. But I think there'd be more of an interest in focusing on more California-specific stuff, because the governor right before Newsom was Jerry Brown, who had some national notoriety like decades ago, but more recently had been like mayor of Oakland and a lot more active in California politics. And he was by far, very popular candidate when he was running, got elected twice, just like Newsom. And that was more in line with, I think, what a typical governor of California would look like if we were not in the current Trump era. But since we are, of course, we need more of a showman. We need somebody that put on airs and say, like, we can do the Hollywood stuff, not so much the Sacramento stuff.
And if Kamala had jumped in, do you think she would have ran away with all the goodies in the bakery?
It's tough. It's tough on that one. She wasn't as far ahead in the polls as I think she would have liked to be for the governor's race. Ultimately she decided not to run, I'm sure, because she's going to run for president in 2028, and this would have held her back. But ignoring that and assuming she was just looking at this like, do I have a chance to win? She definitely would have made the top two. I don't think it would have been a slam dunk for Kamala because she's got her own problems in the state. I mean, many political people remember she performed very poorly in her presidential primary race in 2020. And then going back further, she barely won her Senate race when she was first getting elected in 2016. It was her against another Democrat because of the top two system. And she had way more name recognition. She had a lot more coherent policy stuff, but she just wasn't that popular and she barely won back then. Obviously, she's a lot more popular, a lot more well-funded now. It would have put her in a much better position, but I don't think it would have been like, if Kamala ran, Kamala would have won, no questions asked.
Right. So California has also been in the news for a little redistricting plan and special election coming up this November.
Yeah.
What's, nationally, of course, because as California does, the country does too, it's piqued a lot of interest. It's, I think, a very divisive issue. And I think there's a lot of Democrats, especially, that are cheering for the redistricting. A lot of Republicans are being mean about it. What's your take on it as a resident of the state?
It's a tricky one because we all know why it's happening. It's not because of anything that's going on in California. It is because of something that is happening in Texas and other states. So while that is the motivating factor, ultimately, as a resident of California, the impact will impact us more than any other states. We have to look at it from our perspective. Looking at it from that perspective, the new maps that have been proposed greatly favor Democrats, of course. They would move around a lot of congressional people and open up some competitive seats that weren't competitive before. And that's all very exciting, and I think is probably the right move in terms of looking at the national field. Very locally, though, I have a little bit of hesitation. The maps as they're currently drawn for Congress mostly try to avoid splitting up cities. They want to keep all of the cities that are, within the city border within one congressional district. This is not the case so much with these new maps because they are pulling people from different areas to say, like, there's a lot of Democrats in this city, so let's move them into this district. But we have a little more Democrats in this part of the city, so let's split up the city into 2 or 3 and see if we can kind of put them where we need them as opposed to what is best for that district. Now, people go back and forth on what is best for your district. My city in Lodi is going to be proposed to split into 3 different congressional districts. Currently, it is only represented by 1. Our current state senator, who is our former congressperson as well, thinks this is a great idea. We're going to have 3 different representatives who are all competing to represent California and give you the best deal possible. Who wouldn't want to be represented by 3 different people at the federal level? But our mayor is saying, I think it's actually going to be pretty bad because now we are going to have a smaller delegation to represent our city in 3 different places. Our voice is going to be a lot smaller and much easier to ignore because the rest of this district is going to have whole, complete cities instead of our itty-bitty parts. So he's not looking forward to that at all and thinks that this is actually going to be bad for Lodi. This is a story that's happening in a lot of places across the state where these districts are being moved. And I think I tend to agree with the pessimistic stance, unfortunately. I think it's probably bad for a city to be split multiple ways and not have 1 congressional representative because of the reasons that the mayor said. I think those are mostly true. So large, zoomed out view. This is, I think, the right idea. I understand where Newsom is coming from. I wish we had drawn the maps a little differently, but I understand that couldn't happen the way that things were going because you needed to divvy up people in different places. It's going to be a tough vote for me personally. I would say I probably support it as like a politician looking at the California stuff, but as a voter, I really don't know.
Yeah. Well, and that's what, first of all, on the city splitting thing, that's what Utah did, and they got in trouble for it. Like, they have been splitting up Salt Lake City, which votes, as a city itself, votes relatively blue, but because they split it, they have 4 Republicans representing them.
Yeah.
So that should be an indication that that's probably not the best thing to do. But what I will say on part of I'm not a California resident, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but I do appreciate that Newsom is putting it up to a vote, which Texas did not do.
Oh yeah.
So I appreciate that he's doing it, as democratically as you can gerrymander. But what I think that does, though, is and correct me if I'm wrong, or if you think differently, I think what he's banking on is that, because this is a nothing election this November, nothing's really going on. He's banking on the people that are uber passionate on either side being the ones coming out, and that the people that are passionate about gerrymandering in favor of Democrats are going to be out in more overwhelming numbers than those who are against it.
Yeah, that's definitely the strategy. I think there's been an interesting polling back and forth on whether this is going to pass. Depending on what question you ask people, it really changes what numbers you get, which makes sense, right? You can frame things a bunch of different ways and get an answer you want one way or the other. We've seen that the independent commission that originally draws the districts in California and gave us the districts that we currently have for our Congress is very popular. There's a referendum that passed not too long ago that put that system in place, or maybe it was 2010, so maybe it was a while ago at this point. But regardless, an independent commission people love and want to keep. But when you ask people, do you support Proposition 50, which is this redistricting thing, that also has basically majority support according to the last poll. It's like a 48% versus 30% opposed, which raises the question of what are people really thinking about when it comes to this sort of stuff? If they love the independent commission so much, why do they support this proposition? Ultimately, it comes down to what you're saying. It comes down to the people that really are passionate about this stuff. The partisanship really comes out of people. A question phrasing it do you like the independent commission is not something that you feel the thumb on the scale one way or the other if you're a hyper-partisan. The party isn't telling you, no party is telling you this is good or bad. They're kind of just leaving it up to you because it's already a settled issue and people already have it in place and they'll stick with that. But if they put Proposition 50 in front of you and Newsom really cares about it, and if you're a Democrat and you're really behind everyone on MSNBC, every congressperson is telling me this is a really good idea, as a Democrat, you're going to think, yeah, I think that's a good idea. And if you're a Republican, you're going to say, Trump really hates this. All of the Republicans that I listen to on my podcast hate this. I hate this too. Because you're not thinking about it in terms of the framing that you may be more comfortable with. You're thinking about it in position of what is my partisanship telling me? And there's been a history of whoever is president right now, will determine what your view on the economy is, depending on what party you believe in, right? There was a great article by 538 where they showed the day of inauguration, Republican support in the economy jumped up 40, 50 points and Democrat jumped the same, or decreased the same. Did the economy really change one day to the next? No, but the person in charge of the economy changed, so now you feel differently about it. The same thing is happening here.
Yeah. Well, it's the day after Kamala lost. My mom and I went to the mall, spent a lot of money because we were we got to stimulate Joe Biden's economy. And then we're going to stop spending money on January 20th.
Right.
So moving back to your race, should you win, what do you see as the biggest opportunities that you have for reform? And what do you see as the biggest obstacles?
Well, the thing that I would really like to reform if I'm elected, and the reason that I am running, other than making sure we have a better representative who's not going to get in corrupt scandals, is the money in politics issue. I think that's something that has been popular for forever with the voters, is making sure that we have less money and less dark money, stuff that we don't know where the money's coming from, and so it can help people vote. And there's just never been any action taken on that for reasons that we all know why. Because the politicians feel they need the money, or they really like the money coming in so they can go on their fancy trips or whatever they do with their campaign money. That's the real opportunity I think we have. Somebody who has no connection right now to any corporate money or all that stuff coming in, I think is going to be a net positive for communities. Getting more people elected who believe that and support the will of the voters on that is something I would love to make a lot of progress on. You can go up and down the line, both parties, any district, and look and see, is the money coming in to these incumbents in their campaigns? Does it impact their vote? And yes, it absolutely does. You could list a million different reasons. Every politician. I have a whole opposition page research against Heath Flora and all the stuff that he's gotten money donated from that leads to this direct voting.
Right.
And that's something that's got to change. People,
Right.
going back to the personal touch connection, people need to be representing the people that they have in their community, not these companies.
What I will say that goes off of that is that, like I said, I've been speaking to a lot of people running for office in Illinois. Almost I've been talking to, I think, 5 people running for office. These are Senate and House candidates. And 4 out of 5 of them have campaign finance reform like front and center on their like issues page. Like,
Yeah.
I really think that, I don't know if it was Elon Musk or what it was, but like these midterms, there are so many candidates that are running against the PAC money and the corporate influence in politics. And like this is the year of like anti-PAC and super PAC.
I hope it is. I mean, we saw how much it motivated voters in 2016. You know, Bernie became an overnight celebrity because he was voicing what people were feeling. Same with Elizabeth Warren. And I mean, you know, again, like we've got an Elizabeth Warren acolyte basically leading the race for governor in California. So this is a motivating factor for a lot of people. I hope this is the election that it breaks through and it's not just a fun, buzzy story for people. But we've been burned before, so who knows?
Fingers crossed. If you could give advice to somebody who's considering running for office but isn't sure that they can, or is intimidating by the money aspect, you know, whatever their reason might be, what would you say to them?
Well, I think, unfortunately, the advice I'd have to start with is you can't be afraid to lose. I think a lot of people have a fear of failure, not just in politics and in their career, but in life, right? It's very hard for people to do something if they don't have like a guarantee or a very high chance that they're going to succeed in it. I want to win this race and I'm confident that I have a good chance at it, but I'm also aware of the fact that it's a very uphill battle. I'm in a Republican district running as a Democrat and I don't have a lot of money or connections. There's a very high likelihood that I won't win this race. I don't want this to be a symbolic, I'm doing it for the good of the people. And hey, even if I don't win, like I got a seat at the table, I want to win, just to clarify. But I am also understanding of the fact, and I think anybody running for a seat at any level would have to be cognizant of the fact too, there is real value in having people discuss and debate things that they never thought or cared about before. That's how you uncover a lot of things that people may not have ever taken action on if they're forced to look at something or forced to talk about something that was otherwise swept under the rug. You need to have the value in yourself that you can bring something to a community, even if it's not an elected office win, as great as that would be. There's a lot more good that you can do through the campaign process. So you probably won't have a lot of money. You probably won't have a lot of connections, and you may not be able to break through in the same way. You may not,
Right.
But there's a lot of other good that can be done. So that's the advice that I give to people. And that's at every level of politics too, even beyond just running. Same thing. Like you're probably not going to work in a winning campaign, but having these discussions and doing all of this other stuff, there is value in that, and there is general good that can be accomplished.
Right. The other thing I will say is like imposter syndrome is such a big one. Like we got to get over the imposter syndrome. Like if you want to run, you can do it. You're adding value to the conversation, I promise. Sure, maybe there's the occasional candidate that probably should not have signed those papers to run, but majority of the time people are adding to the discourse and adding to the conversation at hand.
Yes, definitely.
So looking further down the road, but I know it's a little dark and abysmal time right now, but what about California's future and the nation's future really gives you hope right now?
As we discussed, there is the easy answer here of talking to people is great and connecting with people. And that's, I could give the same answer I just gave to the other one of I'm not going to do that because that's boring. And while that is true, it's not really going to help anybody to say that. The thing that does give me hope, I think, is the fact that as we are going through these processes and more things are becoming democratized, the impact, I think, of something like a podcast like this or a social media thing, like, we saw 10 years ago or whatever, the Arab Spring, right? How important it can be when something breaks through, how quickly that can turn into action. That is incredibly motivating. That we see something that never would have been picked up on in another era. Now everything is super present. There's a lot of negative stuff that goes along with that we talked about earlier, like if you say the wrong thing, you get canceled or whatever. Who knows how true that is, but like there's the fear of that, right? But there's also the good of like an off-the-cuff remark from somebody who was completely safe in their seat that was like they were too glib to their voters and or like the Romney 47% thing. Like those kind of moments don't exist until we can have the infrastructure that we get now, where it's been completely streamlined in 2025, even way more so than as effective all that stuff was in the past. How many people are able to break through on, like, we see Pete Buttigieg going on super small podcasts. We see Twitch streamers as people invited to the DNC, because everything now rises up from the grassroots. That's really cool. And I really appreciate how much people are forced to listen when they're in power to the average voter in a way that they never had to before. That's really cool.
Yeah, no, I've never really thought about that one before, but like, yeah, it's what it's taking me back to is last summer when Joe Biden dropped out, Kamala took his place, and Charlie XCX tweeted, Kamala is brat. Like, and that just totally, like, when I think of the 2024 election, Kamala's campaign, like, I think of Charlie XCX and all of like the brat album edits with Kamala. Like, it's so, those things are so intertwined. And it's, I think the critique to that would be, well, who wants a Twitch streamer and a podcaster at the DNC or RNC? But like, so many times, this is where people get their information. This is where people are learning. People don't really watch the news as much anymore, or read the news as much anymore. Like, they're listening to something on their commute. Yeah. Like, this is the way to reach people. This is the way to get ideas out.
Yeah. The removal of gatekeepers across the entertainment industry and the political stuff, which are often intertwined in very troubling ways, on this aspect is very encouraging. I really appreciate that people can come from nothing, and not in a sense of like, I was born on a farm and now I'm the, congressperson, like, because that's usually a fake story anyway. But like, a person in their living room with no connections can talk and connect with people the world over is just the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah. Well, it's having this podcast has been the most eye-opening experience to be able to speak to people from all over the country, from all walks of life. And I feel like every time I record an episode, I walk away feeling a little bit smarter. I walk away feeling like I've learned something new. And like, I hope it's the same way for people that are listening, that, this is something that makes them walk away, especially because I like to end on a hopeful question, but walk away feeling a little bit better about way the world is, even though it's abysmal. It's media like this and those Twitch streamers, whatever it is, like, it's still important, even though, and it is like it is a little hopeful to, like, that is the future, I fear, given that media is being like conglomerated into like one big media ball.
Yeah. I mean, of course I do, as I mentioned earlier, I do mourn the loss of local media and some of the gatekeepers in there, but as we're trying to be positive, there's a silver lining. Yeah.
All right. Well, that is all I have. Is there anything else that you feel like I might have missed?
I think we covered basically everything I wanted to talk about here on the campaign. It was great to go back and forth here, get into the California politics, show a little bit about what's been going on here. I know a lot of people kind of just think, California is a monolith, right? What's happening in Hollywood, what's happening in LA or San Francisco. I know what California is because I listen to Gavin Newsom and I know what's going on in Hollywood. But there's a lot more of the state. It's incredibly large. It's incredibly diverse, both racially, gender-wise, sexuality-wise, politically, of course. Representing the Central Valley in California in these conversations always gets me excited that people can have a deeper understanding of what the state of California is and what the people that make up it believe and what they're talking about. So this is a really cool opportunity to do that.
Do you have a campaign website, and can people donate on it, hypothetically?
Not only can they, I urge them to strongly.
Oh, perfect. Then I will have that linked in the show notes so everyone can toss you a couple spare dollars if they feel so inclined.
Well, thank you. Thank
you for coming on.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks again.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Current Affairs Unfiltered. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Matthew. I found it to be very interesting to talk to somebody that is, actually in California. California has been in the news so much over the last month that I feel like it's so integral to get the information straight from the horse's mouth, for lack of a better word. And I also think that he's a great candidate, someone who really cares about the issues that are affecting his community. And if anybody is listening to this that lives in his district, please support him. And as I mentioned, I will have his campaign website linked in the show notes in case you would like to donate to his campaign and help him unseat this incumbent. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with someone who could use this information. And as always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram or send me an email at currentaffairs.unfilteredpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Keep asking questions, stay engaged, and don't forget to put pressure on your incumbent representatives. I'll see you guys next week.